Hey everybody, welcome back to Principal Outdoors YouTube channel. Today what I thought we'd discuss is how to pick a trolling motor. There's a lot of choice out there, different models, different features, and it can be pretty intimidating, I can imagine, if you're new to the boating or fishing world, how to pick out a trolling motor. I mean, I think that the trolling motor is probably the most important piece of equipment on your boat. It's, you know, boat control when it comes to fishing is so important. You can catch so many more fish if you can keep your boat away from whatever structure or cover you're fishing, and just knowing how to control your boat can really change how you fish, right? And the biggest component for that is a trolling motor. But there's a lot of choice out there, like I said, so so this is what I want to explain, make it easier for you to go out and know what you're looking for when you buy a trolling motor. So the first thing when you think about trolling motors is pound thrust, is the strength of the trolling motor. Now, trolling motors aren't measured in horsepower, basically because, you know, if you look at a prop on an outboard motor, the prop is cupped, and that's what provides forward motion on an outboard, right? But trolling motors are not built for speed at all, right? So the props are relatively flat looking, right? They are cupped a little bit, but relatively flat. Trolling motors are made to push or pull a weight, not for speed. So that's why it's measured in pounds of thrust. And it's very hard to convert the two. You can. I've actually seen the equation. It's massive. Covered a whole chalkboard when I was down at Minn Kota one time. I saw it, and it gave me horrible flashbacks about when I was in high school in my science class, so I ignored it, right? So you can actually compare pound thrust to horsepower, but let's just not worry about that for now. Let's just look at pound thrust, right? So pound thrust starts at 45 to 55 pounds of thrust, and that is 12 volts. So when I say 12 volts, that means one battery. So any Bowmount that you get, it'll either be 45 or 55 pounds of thrust. It'll be a 12 volt trolling motor. And that's good for, you know, as far as strength goes, that would be good for a 14 foot to 16 foot aluminum boat, or any kind of boat of about that length. So that's the smallest motors that are out there. Next stronger pound thrust is 70 to 80 pounds thrust. Now you're into 24 volts. So you need 2 deep cycle batteries, and these are strong. You know, that's a powerful motor. Now you're really getting up there. So that's 24 volts, 70 or 80 pounds of thrust. And I would put that on a boat of 17 to 18 feet long. Right now I'm running a Lund Pro Bass 1875, so it's almost 19 feet long. I run 24 volts on it, and I can go all day, literally all day. No problem, right? So that's it. That's 24 volts, 70 to 80 pounds thrust, 17 to 18, 19 foot boat. The next step up is 36 volts, 112 pounds of thrust. So now you need 3 batteries, 112 pounds of thrust. This is for a big boat. This is for a 20 to 22 foot bass boat or big aluminum boat of that size. So that's basically how we break down the pounds of thrust and the applications on boats. Now, every boat is different, of course. These are just general guidelines. I'll put up a chart at the end so you can take a look at this as well. One thing to remember, I've never heard anybody say they have too much power in their trolling motor. So that's one thing to keep in mind, right? Next thing is shaft length. So you can get a trolling motor for, you know, with a 45-inch shaft length up to a 62-inch shaft length. So that's something that your dealer can help you with. You know, every dealer sells a couple of types of boats, or a couple of different boat companies, and they know what shaft length you need for that particular boat. So any dealer can help you with shaft length like that. It's not really too difficult in that sense. And then the last thing is, one of the features that are built into Minn Kota trolling motors is some of them have transducers built in, which is really practical, because that, you know, if you're fishing on the front of your boat and you only have a transducer on the back of your boat, you're really looking at your graph and you're seeing what's behind you. So you're not looking at what's right below where you're fishing. So ideally you want to have a sonar up front, and you want to have a transducer up front. And the best way to do that is have it built into the trolling motor. Minn Kota's been doing it for many, many years, right? And that way you don't have cables running up the shaft of the motor either. So there's 3 options with built-in transducers. There's US2, which we've had for many years, and that's just a 2D transducer. There's MDI, which stands for Mega Down Imaging. That's my personal favorite built-in transducer, when we came out with MDI, the picture was so clear, you know, beautiful down imaging pictures. I never, you know, a couple of years ago, I wasn't sure if I would use down imaging on the front, but what I use it for most is when I'm largemouth fishing, I can actually see how thick the weeds are. Like I can be out in 12, 15, 17 feet of water, and I can tell if the weeds are just sparse or if I'm right on top of a beautiful weed bed and I want to throw a big swim jig over deep water, you know, over that weed bed. So I get a super clear picture with that down imaging transducer. I get no interference and just a beautiful, beautiful image, right? So that's the MDI transducer. And then the third transducer that's available on some motors is MSI, so mega side imaging. So you can actually get a mega side imaging transducer built right into the motor. So that's another thing to look for is transducers, right? So that covers some of the things you want to look for, some of the basics of it. So let's break down the motors. Really, there's two kinds of motors. There's electric steer motors and there's cable steer motors. And I'll show you the difference. There is a third one that we're going to get into later that's relatively new. But the basic breakdown is electric steer pedals. So that would be this. This is a power drive pedal, right? And it's electric steer, which means it has a wire to it, about 18 feet of cable. And the steering is controlled by an electrical steering motor right here on the shaft, okay? Very good, very stable. The only downside to electric steer is sometimes it doesn't steer as fast as a cable steer, which normally isn't a bad thing. They steer plenty fast, trust me, but it's not quite as fast as a cable steer. Cable steer is the much bigger pedal, and so basically that is what it says. It's cable. So it's kind of like the cables that run your brake system on your bike, running from the pedal to the head of the motor to steer. So the steering on a cable steer is extremely responsive, right? It'll steer left, right really fast. It responds right away. And that's why cable steer is more appropriate for shallow water fishermen. That's why bass fishermen love it. But if you're a pike or any kind of shallow water fisherman, you might want a cable steer because the response is so quick. So if you have to avoid stumps and rocks and all that, it's really quick, right? The downside of cable steer is if you're a trolling guy and you set that motor to 8 or 6 or whatever, and you take your foot off the pedal, it's going to go where it wants to go because the cables can't be so tight to hold it in place that you can take your foot off the pedal and it'll stay the direction it's going. The cables have a bit of give to it so you can actually steer. So that's why it's not the best thing for trolling. An electric steer is really good for trolling because the electric motor will actually hold the shaft in place when you take your foot off the pedal. So you can, even if you don't have iPilot or any feature, you can point the motor where you're going, take your foot off the pedal. The steering, it's not going to go like this. It's not going to steer itself. Now, if there's wind from the side, it's going to go with the wind. But at least it's a little more stable steering. So I always say, if you're a trolling guy and a deep water guy, go with an electric steer. And if you're a bass guy or a shallow water guy, go with a cable steer. That's really the way it breaks down. So those are the two pedals to look for. Do you want to think of? Do you want an electric steer or are you a shallow guy that wants a cable steer? So really that's the basics of it. So what I'd like to get into now is actually talking about the couple of different models from Minn Kota that we sell in Canada. So all of our motors are available in Canada, but really for the Canadian market, there's specific models that are the most popular. So I'm going to go through those. These are Power Drive, Terova, Altera, and Ultrex. I'm going to go through all those individually and explain to you what the difference is to make your decision a lot easier. Why don't we start right away with the Power Drive? So this is a Power Drive right here. This is our entry-level electric steer, right? So it's a great little motor to get you started, super solid. All of the motors are very solid, so don't really worry about that. They're all made to last for years, right? This is our entry level. So it's a Power Drive. You can get it with iPilot. You can get it with a US2 transducer built in. You can get it in 12 or 24 volts. Comes with a battery meter. Like I said, it's available with iPilot, and I hope you watch my other video on iPilot link. Power Drive is available with iPilot, but keep in mind, and this is very important, if you buy a Power Drive with iPilot, there's no pedal, and you can't use the pedal, okay? Speaking of the pedal, like I showed you before, this is the Power Drive pedal right here. So it's an electric steer, very easy to use. You know, if we're holding it like this, you can see that. So steer left, you push there, steer right. There's a constant button here, so, and a momentary. So if you put it on constant, the prop is always spinning, right? If you put it on momentary, when you put your heel there on this button, the prop goes on. If you let go of it, the prop goes off. And there's your speed control right there. So very, very easy to use, very basic pedal, works great. That's the power drive pedal. One of the other features on it is this lever right here. So this helps you deploy the motor. So what you do is you push down on it and it kicks the motor out for you, and then you can let it down like this. Nice and slowly like that in the water. So that's the power drive right there. It's our basic model, lasts for years, does a great job for you. Yeah, that's about it for power drive. So let's move on to the Terrova. And this is the Terrova. Pretty much the most popular motor that we make. It's just a great all-around motor. It's a significant step up from a power drive. And what I mean when I say that is, it's got a couple of features that really make it a great all-around motor. The main thing is lift assist. So this motor is actually one of the first electric steer that has lift assist on it. And what it is this right here, this little thing right here. There's a steel band in there that's wound up, very much like a tape measure. So it's wound up in here, and you can actually see the steel band in the shaft right here, right? So what that does is when I lift up on it, the steel coil, the band that's coiled in there is helping me lift at the same time. So it makes it much easier to pull it in out of the water, and it makes it much more gentle when it drops down into the water. So very easy to take out of the water like that. The other thing that makes it much easier to drop it in the water, put it in the water, is this button right here, this big, this pad right here that you can push down on. So you push down on this, and what happens is, as I push the motor forward, you'll see these ramps here. We call these fall-away ramps, right? And what they are is when I disengage them by pushing down on this bar, they become disengaged, and now I can easily get them off where they were locked in the cradle and gently drop it down. So that makes it a big step up from the power drive. It comes in 12, 24, and 36 volts. It even comes in some longer shaft lengths than what I mentioned before. So you can actually get certain Terrovas with 72-inch shaft lengths. So that's really long. That's for a big, a big 22-foot aluminum boat. And we even make one model that is 87-inch shaft length. And there's a lot of salmon trolling guys that are using that motor as an autopilot as they're trolling around. It has iPilot built into it. They use it as an autopilot. But basically, the 24 volt, the 12, the 36, that's the bread and butter for the Terrova. Really a good motor. Here's a look at the pedal. So again, it's an electric steer, just like a power drive. It's got a few more features. The pedal actually works a bit differently. So it's kind of a heel to toe steering. So left, right, using your heel and your toe. Your speed is right over here. And you can also steer left and right over here if you want on these buttons. So you actually have a choice. And then there's your momentary and constant switches right there that we talked about before. And if you're on momentary, when you step on here or on here, the prop goes. And when you take your foot off, the prop will stop. The other advantage is if you happen to get a Terrova with iPilot, it actually has a spot lock button right on the pedal. So if you want to trigger spot lock, you can actually push it right there. So that's a look at the Terrova. Really a great motor. Many people who start off with power drives, it's not too long before they upgrade up to a Terrova. The good thing with Terrova, if you do get iPilot or iPilot Link, it does come with a pedal, except for one model that we offer without it, but generally it does come with a pedal, and you can use a pedal and the remote at the same time. So that's a differing point from the power drive as well. So that's a look at the Terrova. Now we'll move on to the next motor. All right, now let's get to the top of the line. One of the two motors that are, as far as I'm concerned, at the top of the line, and that's the Altera. So let's just take off this cover. I keep it under wraps. This, by the way, are these beautiful covers made by SB Marine, a Canadian company, available for pretty much all the motors. Really do a great job watching the motors, covering the motors. So that is an Altera. Why is it the highest level motor? Why is it so great? Because I can do this. So that's the Altera. So it's the only motor on the market where you can push a button and it'll go in the water and come out of the water. Just a really good motor. I have a lot of people that buy these motors and they come back to me the next day and they say, yeah, I bought it, or the next year at the shows. And they'll say, yeah, I bought it for my dad because he hurt his back, or, you know, my dad's getting older or whatever. And he just loves the motor because he doesn't have to lower a motor and bring a motor out all the time. He can just do it with the touch of a button, right? So Altera only comes with iPilot or iPilot Link, which means it always has a remote with it. If it's a Link, you can control it from your Humminbird and do what I just did through your Humminbird, which is an amazing feature. The other thing you can do with it is trim up, trim down, so you can do that anytime. And it'll always remember where it was, the height that it was at. So the next time you deploy it into the water, it'll go to where it was last set. So that's a pretty cool feature as well, right? Only available 24 and 36 volts. You can get it with US2 or with MDI or with MSI. So depending on which model, certain shaft lengths you'll have a choice, certain you won't, but there is that option to get it with any of those three transducers. Again, I'm going to say MDI is my favorite transducer. I just love it, so I strongly recommend that. Yeah, auto trim we did, stone deploy. That's really it. That's the Altera right there. It's basically a Terova, but you can trim up and down, and you can stow it as well. So let's stow it. So that's the Altera. Let's move on to our next motor. All right, now we get down to the last motor, what I consider to be the best motor that Minn Kota has ever built in their whole history. 30 years I've been using their motors, 20 years I've been working with them. This is the best motor that was ever designed. I remember seeing this motor a couple of years before it hit the market, before it was even called an Ultrex. I remember trying it out, and I was blown away by the steering. It was everything that I wanted, right? So basically, it's a cable steer. So like we talked about with those bigger pedals, right? So it's a cable steer. It actually has cables going from the pedal up to the steering module right in here. But it also has electric assist to it. So it's a cable and an electric. It's what I call a hybrid motor. It's just amazing the way it works, right? So the steering on it is heel to toe like a Terova or an Altera, but it's actually super quick, as you can see. Now it's not in the water, so it's a little jerky because it's not in the water, but I'm also moving the pedal pretty quick, right? So whenever people were trying this motor for the first time, what they would do, all the bass guys that love cable steers, but they wanted to have iPilot and iPilot Link, they would start stomping on this pedal and really trying to beat on it to see how fast it would steer. You can do that, it's fine. But the beauty of this motor is that you don't have to stomp on it, that you can very lightly push on it, like extremely lightly, and it steers super fast. It is as responsive as a cable steer only motor, but with the electric assist. So this is part of the reason why it's my favorite motor. A couple of other differences is it's a scissor style mount. So basically, to get it out of the water, there's a cable on it, so you pull on the cable and pull it out of the water and lay it down in its own cradle. So it works a little differently than an electric steer motor in that sense, right? You can get it in 45, 52, and 60-inch shafts, 60, 62-inch shafts, 24, 36 volts only with either iPilot or iPilot Link, so they all come with a remote as well. But I'll tell you honestly, I have the remote in my boat all the time. I never use it. It's there. I have to charge it every once in a while, but I never actually use it. I just love the pedal on this trolling motor so much, right? So as I kind of alluded to, the problem with cable steer motors is you couldn't have any iPilot function. So you couldn't have autopilot, you couldn't have cruise control, all those beautiful things that I talked about in my iPilot video, right? And those are some of the functions that I never thought I would want to use that much, but I use all the time now. So as an example, you know, I do mostly bass fishing. So if I've got a nice shoreline that I want to follow down, I'll stay a couple of feet off the shoreline. I'll point the trolling motor along that shoreline. I'll turn autopilot on, and it'll stay on that direction no matter what. I can also set cruise control, but I don't usually do that, but I can. But what I want is the motor to stay in that direction. So basically, I can take both feet off the pedal. Even though I got a recessed pedal, it's much better to have 2 feet on the deck. And what happens is at the end of the day, I'm a lot less tired. And you know, that's the beauty of it. You're not standing on one leg, 1 foot perched on the pedal and steering all day long. You can have 2 feet on the floor, use that autopilot, follow that shoreline. You know, you catch a fish, you got a spot lock button on there, you just hit the spot lock. You don't have to worry about blowing onto the shore or anything like that. Like, I found so many uses for this trolling motor that made my life easier as a fisherman. So that's the Ultrex right there. Again, my favorite motor. Cable steer, very fast, cable and electric, really popular. I mean, every bass boat has this motor on it. It's the one motor that people are trying to copy because it is so much a favorite of all those bass guys out there. So give the Ultrex a look. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll just go over a couple of accessories with you, and let me know, you know, please let me know if there's any questions you have. Thanks. All right, so let's wrap this up. I hope you got an idea of what to look for when you're looking for motors. I just kind of wanted to go through the basics of all the different types of motors that Minn Kota makes. Now let's just go through a couple of accessories, and you don't really have to worry about accessories with motors. They pretty much come with what you need. One of the big questions you do have to ask yourself, though, is about a release plate. This is a release plate that's available. This is for electric steers, you know, excellent for Altera and Tarova. So a quick release plate is so that you can take your motor on and off at the end of the day. So you don't necessarily need that, because when you mount a motor to a boat, you're bolting it underneath, so it's kind of hard to steal anyways. But sometimes, because of your cover for your boat, or just if you leave your boat out at your dock while you're away back home, you might want to be able to take it off and put it away. So in that case, you'd want a release plate. All of our release plates are lockable, so you can put a padlock on them. And I'm going to put up a list of the different release plates and what model of motor that they work for. So that's the release plate right there. The other very important thing is this connection. So this is where your trolling motor is going to plug into your boat. So most boats that you buy, they're wired directly, you know, from the bow to the deep cycle batteries that are in your boat. Make sure you always use deep cycle batteries for your trolling motors. Don't ever hook it up to your cranking battery. Not a good idea. But the plug that goes at the front of the boat, that can be a point where there's problems. I've seen a number of problems with boats. Number one is the gauge of wire that a boat manufacturer uses is too small. You should at least use 8-gauge wire. Some boats go as high as 6, which is excellent. And you need a good quality plug. This is a new plug that came out from Johnson Outdoors from Minn Kota last year, and it's the best plug that I've ever seen. So you can easily unplug it, take it off. There's a cap for the receptacle on there. So take a look for this plug-in receptacle. Really good product right there. Another item that you might want to have is Copilot. So this Copilot, this has been around for 20 years or 15 years. Basically, it replaces your foot pedal. So we have Copilots for power drives and for Tarovas. And it's basically a remote that does what your pedal does. So don't get confused with iPilot. This has no iPilot features. But if you have a basic power drive or a basic Tarova and you just want a wireless remote, we still make Copilot available for those models. That's Copilot. And then the last thing is there's Bounce Buster. So this is actually for an electric steer. So you could use this on a Tarova power drive, Altera. And it's a bounce buster, so it mounts on the floor of your boat, and it's a post that supports the head of the trolling motor when your motor is stowed and you're heading down the lake. Now, this is not something you always need, especially for electric steers. The head of the motor is actually fairly light, but if you are somebody that fishes the Great Lakes, really rough water, then you would want this. We make them as well for Ultrexes and other motors. Ultrex, it actually comes with a bounce buster, so please do install it. Very, very important. And we also make them for other cable steer motors. So those are bounce busters. So those are really all the accessories that you need to look at, or the options that you have. The most important ones, of course, replacement props. Always have a replacement prop with you. I've been with Minn Kota for 20 years, but I've been using Minn Kotas for 30 years altogether. And I've only broken one prop in my life. They're tough as nails, but I always have a spare in my boat just in case. Because like I said, your trolling motor is the most important piece of equipment in your boat. It's the way you're going to catch more fish, is being able to use your trolling motor properly and use all the features that come with it. So again, I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. I appreciate the support. And if any dealers out there have any videos that they'd like me to do, please, you all got my email, so drop me an email or a message on Facebook. My address is there, and we'll do a video for you. Thank you very much.